Old school DCU Dragonfly slope glider build video number 2. What's up everyone, it's Ollie from flightcomp, and today I'll give you an update on my slope glider project that I'm doing. I've got the vertical or the rudder built it up over the plans, and it's rough shaped. I need to sand sort of like an airfoil profile into this around the leading edge and sharpen the trailing edge and finish sand it. But I'll probably do that towards the end of the build. And then I got the wings sheeted, and the leading edge and sub-trailing edges are attached. And I gotta say, these came out pretty damn good, even with the cores being sort of jacked up. But here they are. I have rough sanded the leading edge hardwood triangle stock, but obviously it needs to be well rounded, and finish sanded. And then I have balsa wood sub trailing edge stock on there. So yeah, really easy to do, and they came out real nice. Pretty happy with that. So the next thing I got to do is work on the trailing edges, and basically I have to glue on some of this hardwood stock onto the back of the trailing edge on both pieces, and then sort of tack glue those on to the wings very lightly, and then sand everything to get a nice uniform shape across the trailing edge and the wing. And then basically break it off, and then cut them and put torque tubes in here for the ailerons, and attach a piece here, and maybe do the wing tips, and then I could go on into actually joining the two wings halves together. So I'll peruse the instructions and see what I got to do, and then get back to you. Alright, well, I managed to glue the trailing edge stock to the wing, and also the hardwood stock that is supposed to go on the trailing edge. So it's a piece of hardwood, trailing edge, and then the wing. See, like that. Obviously, at the root here, there's not much to sand, but when you get out to the wingtips, there's a considerable step that you got to kind of knock off on both sides. And this piece of hardwood's square stock, so all of that has to get sanded to shape, and it's kind of a considerable amount of sanding. I've already sanded this side, so you can see the difference in the way everything looks here. So, sanding the balsa trailing edge isn't a big deal, but the hardwood is kind of a chore. You kind of got to get a nice sharp trailing edge going like that, and try to keep a uniform thickness, or maybe even get it thinner as you go to the tip. But I'm not worried about sanding this trailing edge razor sharp. I think it'll be just fine the way it is. So this has been sanded with just 220 grit, and I'll probably, after I finish rounding the leading edge and putting the tip on, I'll hit this all with 300 or 400 and smooth the whole thing out. Still have to do this very pointy leading edge. It's just triangle stock, and obviously we're going to lose thickness on this leading edge when we start rounding it, so that's kind of strange. It's a little bit concerning. We'll have to try to keep a nice straight line as we sand it round, because I don't want to get a bunch of waves going in here. And then I've marked where I need to cut the aileron. So, here's the moving part of the aileron. And I just tacked these on actually in a few places with some super glue or CA. So I actually have to break the entire trailing edge off and install a torque tube here and make this cut for the aileron. So that might be a little tricky. What I'm going to do now is do the sanding on this guy. After I do that, I'm going to mark the aileron here, and then I'm going to attempt to break off these trailing edges and install the torque tubes. And then I think we got to move on to the wingtips, and then we can glue these things together. So I managed to separate the trailing edge from the wings. Was actually a little easier than I thought. And I cut the ailerons where they needed to be cut. So this middle piece is 9 inches long. And then I've put a channel in the central pieces to fit the torque tubes, and made some notches for clearance. And I have this one already done up here, so you can see I've glued this piece of trailing edge stock back to the wing, and we have the torque tube in here. And this is what is going to drive the ailerons. So we'll have a servo mounted here with some rods going to this torque tubes. So that came out pretty good. I'm going to finish this one up. So we'll get this torque tube installed in here and glue this piece to that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is probably put the wingtip blocks on and sand those to shape. I'm going to have to figure out how to sand the tips to shape and match the trailing edge of the ailerons. But yeah, it's coming along really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this part up right here, and then we'll move on to something else. Right, moving right along. Glued the tip blocks on. I reattached the ailerons just with some masking tape down here, a few little dabs of glue, and some more tape here, and a dab of glue on the end. And I attached the tip blocks to the wing with wood glue. And on this guy, I've already done the majority of the sanding. These are square tip blocks. It would have been nice if they were triangle stock. I looked around for some triangle stock, but didn't have any, because I actually sanded a 45-degree angle into the tips, and that's for these winglets. So this is just some thin plywood, and you cut the winglets out, and then you know, they get glued on something like this eventually. That'll be after the wing gets covered. So yeah, came out pretty good. The other thing I did was sort of assemble the elevator pieces. There's a middle large piece, and then there's a tapered moving elevator part, and then there's tip blocks. So I tack glued the tapered elevator to the middle piece, and then I glued on the tips. All of that I did with wood glue, and just used some masking tape to hold it all together. So this all needs to be sanded, and then once it's all sanded, the leading edge is rounded, and got a nice shape going, I'll just break off the elevator, and we can bevel that or round it off for whatever hinges I'm going to use. But yeah, so it's, you know, it's coming along really quickly, and I'm really enjoying working with this old style kind of construction. Let's do this real quick. Just move some of the junk I got here, and put the wings out here like this. Give you an idea of what this guy is going to look like. So there's the wing. Right there. Looking pretty good. You know, I gotta say, it's once I sand this kind of to shape, I'm gonna basically be able to join the wing halves together. And that'll complete most of the wing. I'll have to round these ailerons off and figure out what kind of hinges I'm gonna use. But yeah, I think we already knocked out a majority of the construction on this model, you know, as far as the woodwork goes. So I think I'm going to call that good for part 2. And then when I get back to you guys in part 3, I think I'll have finished this already, and we'll move on to actually joining the wing halves together. And hopefully I would have knocked out some of the sanding for the tail, and finish sanding the leading edges and stuff on the wing, and get into actually, you know, mounting the wing onto the fuselage and servo installation. Alright, cool. Well, thanks a lot. Hope you guys enjoyed. I've certainly enjoyed working with an old kit like this, bringing back a ton of memories. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled for part 3 in the near future. We'll talk to you later. Bye.